Good evening, everybody. We're going to call to order the Tuesday, September 1st meeting of Sanitary District 2 Board of Directors. Please join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Rebecca, can we have a roll call, please?
Board Member Casisa.
Here.
Board Member Lee.
Here.
Board Member Ravazio.
Here.
Board Vice President Kuhnhart.
Here.
Board President Beckman.
Here. Thank you, Rebecca. And with that, we're going to adjourn to closed session on a matter. Yes.
To take public comment on closed session.
Oh, okay. So there is a closed session on a matter of anticipated litigation. So we will first open this up for public comment on the closed session. Seeing no attendees in attendance, we will close public comment. Oh, Rebecca, were there any emailed public comments on this item?
There were no emailed public comments.
Great. And actually, a attendee has just joined the line. So we will, we're doing public comment right now for the closed session item for SD2. So if you'd like to make a comment on that, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. Seeing none, we will close public comment, and the Board of Directors will adjourn for this conference with legal counsel. So we are going to leave this meeting and return once closed session has ended. Great. Okay, we are all back. We'll go ahead and proceed with the meeting then. The Board of Directors has just returned from closed session. We have nothing to report. So we're going to move on to item 3, which is open time for public comment. This is a time for any members of the public to comment on items not on the agenda. If you would like to make a comment, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Speakers will be given 3 minutes apiece. Rebecca, do we have any emailed open time comments for SD2?
We do not have any emailed public comments.
Great, thank you. And seeing no raised hands in the audience, we will close open time. There are no presentations, which brings us to the consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been discussed previously and do not need to be discussed again. Any member of the council or the public can pull an item from the consent calendar for consideration. Are there any members of the council who would like to pull a consent calendar item? Excuse me, Board of Directors, not council. Seeing none, we will turn it over to the public. If any members of the public would like to pull a consent calendar item or comment on the consent calendar, please go ahead and raise your hand. Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back to the Board of Directors for a possible motion. Bob.
Move to approve items 5A and 5B.
Great. Is there a second? David seconds. Thank you. Rebecca, can we have a vote, please?
Board Member Casisa.
Yes.
Board Member Lee.
Yes.
Board Member Ravazio.
Yes.
Board Vice President Kuhnhart.
Muted, David.
Yes.
Board President Beckman.
Yes, thank you. There are no public hearings, which brings us to item 7A, our first business item. And this is to potentially authorize the district manager to award a construction contract for Trailer Court, Village, and Sausalito Pump Station improvements, project number 20205, to the lowest responsible bidder for an amount of $831,000. RJ, please take it away.
Thank you, Board President Beckman and board members. So staff recently opened bids for the project you referenced. Bids came in 3% under engineer's estimate. And a couple of noteworthy parts of this project is this is going to reestablish a actual and highly accurate method of calculating flows that are sent to CMSA treatment plant, which are used to establish our fees. Since about 2015, our flow meter, we had one singular flow meter, and that started having faulty readings, and so we were having to do some approximations. And since then, we've installed about 4 total, and this will be the last of those 4 flow meters. So that's really one of the bigger parts of this project. And then the only other thing worth mentioning is, since coming to advertise, there was a slight adjustment to add 2 additional valves since we last came to the board here. and that was a request from CMSA due to adding additional functionality because some of the valves were noted as being faulty. So,
but it still came in under.
So we revised the estimate. We upped it 50,000 to account for those two valves, and then based on that newly revised estimate, it came in under 3%.
Great. Thank you. Is that all to your staff report, RJ?
Yes, and so
Awesome.
yeah, we're requesting authorization to proceed with the construction award of the construction contract.
Great, thank you. Would any members of the board like to ask any questions? If not, we'll go ahead and turn it over to public comment. Any members of the public who would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand through Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Rebecca, did we get any emailed comments on this?
No emailed public comments.
Great, and I do not see any raised hands, so we will close public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion and a possible motion. Who'd like to start us off? And if there are no comments, we can just take a motion.
I'll go ahead and make
Fred.
the motion. Yeah, I'll go ahead
Great.
and make the motion.
Thank you, Fred. Is there a second?
Second.
Great, thank you guys. Rebecca, vote when you're ready.
Board Member Casissa,
Yes.
Board Member Lee,
Yes.
Board Member Ravazio,
Yes.
Board Vice President Kuhnhart,
Yes.
Board President Beckman.
Yes, thank you. That concludes our business items and brings us to district manager and board member reports. Is there a district manager report? Okay, no district manager report. Do we have any board member reports? Alrighty, fantastic.
Well, I have a question of RJ. Are we seeing success at advancing with the addition of capacity to obtain reusable fuel from operations?
Am I clarifying the request? Is this we're talking about renewable diesel, or what exactly are we?
Yes. Yes. No. The new equipment install that was proposed to MCE, and I'm hearing from MCE that they have given approval for our application.
I'd have to get back to you on that particular item.
Okay.
I don't have that information in front of me. Thank you.
Later.
Okay, great. Then we will go ahead and adjourn the SD2 meeting, and the town council meeting will begin at 6:30.
See you then. Oh, wait a minute. What line are we on? For that?
You're
Same
on
one.
this meeting, but I just recommend you turn off your cameras until 6:30 or 6:28, and we will
Great.
reconvene shortly.
Okay, should we pause the recording or anything?
Yes. Okay, we are recording.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. We're going to call to order the Tuesday, September 1st regular meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Please join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
of the United States
and to the
of
republic
America,
for which it stands,
which it
one nation,
stands,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Rebecca, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Casissa?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Here.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart?
Here.
Mayor Beckman?
Here. Thank you, Rebecca. That brings us to open time for public comment. This is a time for any members of the public to comment on any items not on the agenda. Members of the public will be given 3 minutes apiece to speak. You may raise your hand via Zoom to comment, or you may email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. We will start with Roy.
Before Roy starts, he did send me a PDF, and I want to make sure that, Roy, are you there? Can you hear us?
Oh, Rebecca, I'm not a host, so I don't have the ability to unmute Roy. Thank you.
Oh, you know what? Must have gone away into closed session.
No worries. Thank you. Okay, we'll bring Roy on now. Hi, Roy.
I am now unmuted.
Okay. I'm assuming you want me to share the slides that you sent over earlier?
Please.
All right, I will start your timer once I share the screen and let you know it's good to start.
So I'll just have to really breeze through the slides really fast.
Okay, your, oh, I have to go to full screen view for these. This isn't.
Right there.
Okay, there, it is shared.
Okay, MCE, since its inception, has been deceptive and non-transparent about the cost of energy, what energy is delivered to customers, choice, and environmental impacts. Here's a slide from 2016. They show that they have lower bills. Those claims were then and still are untrue. Next. I attempted years ago to get competitive quotes from PG&E and MCE. They said they couldn't do it because of regulation. Finally, in June of this year, they came up with this comparison, and notice that PG&E Solar Choice 100% is 5.6% less than Deep Green. PG&E Solar Choice is the least expensive, a no-brainer choice. Next. Power to choose. Isn't it ironic? If the elected officials really supported choice, they would have implemented at inception MCE as an opt-in instead of an opt-out. Next. These next 4 pages are from articles. The institutional source of blackout problems is the proliferation of community buying cooperatives, CCAs. Marin Clean Energy is a CCA. Recent rolling blackouts have exposed the green power goal of 100% green power as a recipe for power crisis. And it's not likely that the politicians will be willing to get a power grid with more diverse and reliable energy. Next. Here's a map from that article showing the megawatts generated by the CCAs. Next. Here's a matrix of 4 of the major CCAs. You know, Marin on the right-hand side. They don't show the power generation outage, but you can find that in a Marin IJ article listed in the back of this slide. Next. Why is California burning? California's 2 last governors conveniently blame global warming for the massive destruction. Green allies have long stood against the harvesting of dead trees and the aggressive cleaning of brush. The state has subsidized massive increases in wind and solar power. All this at a time when power supplies are increasingly constrained. Reports showed demographics and policy details how California's draconian anti-climate change regimes has exacerbated economic, geographic, and racial inequality. Ironically, California's efforts to save the planet have done little more than divert greenhouse gas emissions to other states and countries. Next. In conclusion, bad decisions and policies are made when facts are disregarded and substituted for ideology and non-facts. 9 gigawatts of electricity have been taken offline in the last 5 years from shutting down natural gas power plants. The recent blackout was a result of a grid power shortage of 4.4 gigawatts. Had there
Thank you, Roy.
been a pandemic, that shortage would have been 10 to 15 gigawatts.
Thank you, Roy.
And citizens, the council is not working.
Roy, I'm sorry.
That was time.
Thank you very much, Roy. Move on. Next is going to be Margaret.
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This kind of follows along with the power issues that we have. On August 14th, 15th, and 16th, 3 nights in a row, the hillside in East Corte Madera had blackouts. All of them started around 5 or 6 in the evening and lasted a few hours, 3 nights in a row. According to PG&E and the recording that they send out, it affected 479 households, all on the east side, hillside of Corte Madera. And there have been a lot of different theories about why there were those blackouts. The heat overload, because that was the time of the high heat, revolving blackouts, or there's some kind of faulty power circuit or pole or transmitter in East Corte Madera. And all 3 times PG&E reported on their information line that repair crews were at the scene. So it makes me think that there's something faulty in that power grid somewhere. and no one has been able to get an explanation of it. My fear is that there's something really faulty, and the next time we have some kind of issue, there'll be sparks, something will happen. I would like someone from the town, either the council or someone in authority in the town, to find out from PG&E what exactly that problem is and whether the defect might pose a danger to our neighborhood.
Great. Thank you, Margaret. All right, there are no other hands up at this time. Rebecca, do we have any emailed public comments for open time where the speaker has not come and spoken?
And while we're waiting for that, Margaret, and this is Todd, I'll send you an email from PG&E. We have a summary of what the issue was. So I'll forward that to you, and we can talk offline as we move forward in the week.
Sorry, Rebecca.
No, there were no emailed public comments.
Great. Okay, thank you. Seeing no further public comment, we will close open time. There are no presentations, so that brings us to item 4, which is the consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have already been discussed previously and do not need to be discussed again. Any member of the council or public can pull a consent calendar item for discussion. Would any members of the council like to pull a consent calendar item? If not, we will turn it over to the public. Would any members of the public like to pull a consent calendar item for discussion or comment on the consent calendar? Rebecca, did we have any email comments on the consent calendar?
No emailed comments on the consent calendar.
Great, thank you. And seeing no hands up, we will close public comment and bring it back to the council for a motion on the consent calendar. Bob.
Move to approve items 4A and 4B.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Perfect, thank you.
Second.
Rebecca, can we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you. That brings us to public hearings. Our first public hearing is 5A, which is consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 31/2020, increasing by approximately 7.85% the maximum rates that may be charged for delivery of solid waste collection and dual stream recycling services by Mill Valley Refuse, with rates and terms and conditions effective retroactively to July 1st, 2020. Under the proposed rate increase, Mill Valley Refuse Service will spread the fee increase for services provided during the first 3 months of the current fiscal year over the remaining 9 months of the year, resulting in all customers paying a 10.47% increase in each of their next 3 refuse bills only.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So there are 3 actions are requested of the town council. Again, that's to conduct a public hearing on the proposed rate increases and discuss the following residential rate structure options. We can continue with the current tiered rate format with varying rates, flat area, hill area, and Christmas tree hill area based on higher operating costs for garbage collection in hill areas, or transitioning to a blended rate structure which spreads the cost of service among all Corte Madera residential curbside customers. 2, council may also consider applying additional reduction to either residential curbside rate structure by electing to lower the franchise fees received by the town and using that reduction to offset the rate increase to residential curbside customers. If acceptable, number 3, if acceptable, consider adoption of resolution 31/2020, which is attachment 1, approving solid waste collection rates for 2020-2021 and terms and conditions effective July 1st, 2020. And so what I wanted to do is give some brief background again for the council and members of the community. In February of 2006, the town of Corte Madera and Mill Valley Refuse Service, MVRS, entered a 20-year, 6-month agreement. And so we currently have 6 years remaining on our franchise agreement right now for the collection of solid waste collection services. The franchise agreement established base rates that may be charged by MVRS. Per the agreement, rates may be adjusted to provide MVRS a fair rate of return on certain increases in cost. And so currently we have Jim Averoni the managing director of MPRS, is on the call, and I'll turn it over to him to provide some background and discussion for the council. Every 3 years, we have an independent party. R3 comes in and will review any rate increases and confirm that they are appropriate per our agreement. Right now, we're in year 2 of that, so that review will take place next year. The last rate increase by MPRS was July 1st, 2019, when the town council approved a 4.06 increase. Prior to that, the council approved a 13.77 rate increase on July 1st of 2018. And there were no rate increase requests for the years 2017 and 2016. So part of the discussion, the town received an update in 2020-2021 by MPRS rate application proposed rate sheet that Corte Madera terms and conditions in July of 2020 with the request to schedule a rate hearing before the town council during the month of September. And so in July, we knew there was going to be a potential rate increase, but again, there were so many moving parts due to COVID-19 that Jim and MPRS were thoughtful enough to basically wait so we can have some knowns and fully understand the impacts. Under the proposed terms and conditions, we've revised to include new compacted trash section under commercial terms and conditions. This revision reflects that the rate for pickup of compacted trash is 4 times the rate listed for 1 or 2 yards of compacted trash on the commercial rate sheet. The terms include a notation that MPRS reserves the right to limit weight loads of compacted trash in single containers if the container became too heavy for their drivers to roll the truck or too heavy for the lift mechanism on the truck to lift the container. This language matches language that already exists in Tiburon and Strawberry for similar commercial accounts in the 2 jurisdictions. And so Jim Veroni basically gave a summary. It's on page 2 at the bottom. I'll just read this paragraph real quick for you, but these are the issues with COVID-19 and really why we're asking for a rate increase. The request of the rate increase accounts for the decrease in commercial revenue experienced during the COVID-19 crisis. Rising labor costs, the need to purchase 2 new trucks required to meet California's strict emission standards, and increases in costs for liability insurance, workers' compensation insurance, and healthcare. Mr. Averoni also cited the required contribution to the budget of the JPA from $120,000 last year to $350,000 this coming year as another factor, stating the contribution was much lower last year because huge volumes of material from the California wildfires went to the Redwood landfill, lowering the contributions previously required from Marin jurisdictions. With that material no longer flowing into Redwood, our JPA fees are back to pre-fire levels. Mr. Averoni is also providing some positive news, noting that while the rate application includes a rise in labor costs of 4.5% per union contracts, they have eliminated the cost of 1 trash route and projected lower dump fees to counter the loss of commercial business. And so last year, when we had this discussion before council, council asked staff to work with Mill Valley Refuse on any future discussions of rate increases to evaluate a couple different options. One of them was to look at possibly blending the rates into one or a combination thereof. And the second thing that council asked staff to research was franchise fees. Would we, if we were to ever consider lowering franchise fees, which your town manager doesn't recommend, but nevertheless, council asked for that information, and so we're going to go over it. But council asked what that would look like if we were to lower our franchise fees, and so we'll discuss that as well. And so again, this rate increase is for 9 months, but we also outlined what that would look like over a 12-month period. And so again, if this rate increase that's being asked over a 12-month period would be 7.85% over 9 months, I'm sorry, over 12 months, and over a 9-month period for the remainder of the year, it would be 10.47%. So here's some options to consider. Again, it's at the bottom of page 3 of the staff report. Council again asked to discuss approving one of two rate structures provided by Mill Valley Refuse for consideration. One which continues 3 tiers. That's currently where we're at now: a flat rate, a hill area rate, and a Christmas tree hill rate. And a blended rate structure which spreads the cost service among all Corte Madera residential curbside customers. And so if you scroll down, you'll see what that chart looks like. Option 1 is continuing the current tiered rate format: flat, hill, and Christmas tree hill. This is what we've known since we've started our contract with Mill Valley Refuse in 2006. We're all familiar with this. We gave you 2 columns. There's the 12-month annual cost of 7.85%, and then also the 9-month compressed cost for the remainder of this year, to give you an idea. I also want to thank, and I was remiss in it, this staff report was analyzed and provided and written by Rebecca Vaughn. And so Rebecca, this is her good work. I'm just reading her words. So thanks, Rebecca. And so this is what we're used to here, the current rate structure. So if you scroll down to the next one, this would be a transition to a blended rate structure, which spreads the cost of service to all Corte Madera residential curbside customers. And I'm going to turn this over to Jim in a second, but this is how Jim explained it to me. And so when we looked at this, why would we even consider it? And so historically, when we did this back in 2006, decades ago, you know, there were different costs between the flat area, hill area, and Christmas tree hill. Mill Valley Refuse had to use different equipment. And so it made a lot of sense to have a tiered rate. We're one of the only jurisdictions that currently have 3 rates. In Tiburon and Southern Marin, Mill Valley Refuse over the last few years has recommended that they actually blend their flat and hill rate areas because they can use the same equipment now. They don't have to use different equipment. And so there's been discussions throughout Southern Marin over the past few years. So when we looked at this, we gave you only one other option. And the reason why we did it, and again, I'm going to turn this over to Jim in a second, was that, okay, if the flat and hill rate is the same equipment, then they should absolutely be tiered into one. Christmas Tree Hill, there are approximately 78 residents. And if you look at the blended cost, if you took the 78 residents and you blended them out over the approximate, I think, 2,800 residential units we're talking about, it's really a low impact. And so it made sense for us when we looked at all the options. If we were to provide an option for you to consider, it would be this one, to blend it into one, all 3 of them, and not tier anything. And so that's what's before you in option 2. And you know, I'm going to stop the conversation right there, Mr. Mayor. If the council has any questions, if you want to talk about tiered rates, or if you'd like me to continue on the franchise fee discussion.
Yeah, burning questions. Go ahead, Charles.
My question about the hill rate versus the flat rate is ultimately, if you blend them, why the flat rate would go up. If it's the same equipment, theoretically, I would assume that it would go down to the flat rate. And so the increase in the flat rate seems like a grab and a move up, and either it was underpriced or basically I just want to understand how we got to 17% increase for the flat people in the flats to basically absorb when it's the same equipment and the same operation. Because to me, that's not the same. That means that one of them was that there's a balancing act there, which I'd like to understand more.
Sure. No, there's no doubt about this. In if we do any blended rate in any scenario, the flat area is going to take a substantial increase year 1. There's just no way around it. The discussion that happened last year and that we've had with Mill Valley Refuse was, okay, are there any differences between these rates, the areas that we set back in 2006? Because if there is, we need to know them and understand them. And how I understand it, I'm going to give this question to Jim. But, you know, again, the flat area, no matter what, their rates will double in any of these scenarios if you blend them. They're going to take, it's going to, and you're right, if you're talking about fairness, that's for you. It's a tough one, you know, to explain to those that live in the flat area. But then for those that live in the hill area, if there's no difference in operations, there is a discussion to be had on the fairness for that as well. But I'm going to turn that over to Jim because he's the expert on operations, and he has a much better way of succinctly explaining this. So Jim, can you jump in and answer Councilmember Lee's question?
You're muted, Jim.
Hello, can everyone hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, the history of the Flat Hill and Christmas Tree Hill rates dates back a long time, back to the 1960s. And back then, things were just different. I mean, I was a little kid at the time, so I'm not going to definitely be able to tell you all the differences, but the trucks were stick shifts instead of automatics. The getting up in the hills, back in those days, we were carrying cans on our backs. It was not curbside service, so it was more difficult to drive up to the hills. Houses were spread further apart. There were long driveways to go up and down. And so those were reasons that the hill residences cost more to service than the flat residence. So there was developed a flat rate, a hill rate, and the Christmas Tree Hill rate was another issue where the bigger trucks couldn't even go up Christmas Tree Hill, which we've always defined. There was a water tower or water tank right there on Summit Avenue or Redwood Avenue. Anyway, everything above that water tank had to be done way back when. It was done in a pickup truck. Now it's done, now they've developed these small packers that can go into very narrow streets and even up and down people's driveways. So there were those three levels of service way back when, and that has just persisted until present day. Coming to the present, it's simply a fact that now that we've gone to curbside service and the trucks are all fully automatic and much easier to drive, these costs of operating, these operating costs are just, they're not that different. They're not very different at all from the flat and the hill. And so the whole reason to charge a hill residents a different rate than the flat residents is really just gone away. And so if you want to move to a blended rate where everyone is paying the same, which in my opinion, and as I've stated here, as I've described the way we operate now, is a fair way to, is just a matter of fairness. There is just no really operational difference that justifies higher rates on the hills than on the flat. You necessarily have to be revenue neutral. You drop the higher hill rate, but you raise the lower flat rate until they are blended to a rate that is equal enough so that everyone is paying the same rate and the amount of revenue to us is exactly the same as was coming through the tiered rates. So for us, it's no, we're not making more money than sticking with the tiered rates. It's the same amount of revenue coming through us, but it's a fair way to charge our residences. As far as Christmas Tree Hill goes, just real quick, there were only 78 of them. And when we did an analysis of just combining the flat and hill and continuing to make Christmas Tree Hill pay more because they do require a smaller truck, that made some sense. But when you did the blending of the rate, including them into the blend, it only amounted to 33 cents a month for the Flat and Hill people. It just was not, since there are so few residences up there, it was just not a significant amount, and it didn't seem to make any sense to continue charging them so much more for their service. So I think if you decide to go with a blended rate, the blending them everyone together is the way to go.
Charles, do you feel that answered your question?
Not totally. You know, I mean, the flat rate, there's more than half the residents of the town that live in the flat rate. And I'm just wondering how, if ultimately for years they've been the same operation, that they're so different is really what I'm looking for. You know, like even if they were separate rates, but the cost would be the same, why weren't those adjusted to basically be nominally almost the same? And so basically, if there was a reason for correction that's coming up, that, you know, I just need to understand it in more depth so that I can validate why all my neighbors are going to pay 17% more than they were before I, you know, made a decision. So.
And if I could just jump in there, because I think I'm having sort of the same question, but my, you know, like how I'm thinking of it is kind of like, you know, Jim, you spoke to the fact that the operations here have to be revenue neutral, right? The changes that we make have to be revenue neutral. That's the point, which I think we all understand. But you're explaining to us how it's not that the cost of providing service to the flats has gone up, it's that the cost of providing service to the hillsides over the years has come down. So we would think that in becoming revenue neutral, as your costs go down, your cost of providing service to the hillsides go down, the cost, you know, assessed to the residents on the hillside would go down as well, as opposed to saying, as your costs to providing service to the hillsides go down, costs that are assessed to residents in the flats go up. That's, I think, the disconnect that I think Charles and I are kind of grappling with.
Well, you have to understand that the blended rate is based on the rates that already exist, and so there hasn't been or whenever we create rates each year, it's based on the total operations in the town of Corte Madera. So the rates are as they are based on the number of trucks and drivers and hours that we spend in Corte Madera. Now, because there was always a tiered rate, the Hill people paid, started out at a higher level, and every time there was a rate increase, it was a percentage rate increase that applied to their higher rate in the beginning. And so their rates have separated and become higher than what they ought to be. And conversely, the flat rates are actually, as we see now, if you blend them all together, lower than they should have been. So blending them together in a revenue neutral way creates this system that where they this one year correction where the flat rates go up and the hill rates come down.
So Jim, that does answer my question, and I appreciate the transparency and honesty of what had happened and transpired due to contractual negotiations and basically the longevity of the contract and where we are now. And I think that in doing so and talking about it in that way, it makes it much easier for me to basically, you know, vote towards a more fair and even approach to basically correct what had, you know, with all in rights had transpired previously. So
yeah, and
thank you for that.
By the way, you'd be the second city. Belvedere tackled this same question a couple years back, and they did blend their rates so that everybody in the hill and the flat paid the same, are paying the same now. So this is a debate that other people have noticed, and as I say, Tiburon, you're the second to really tackle it and consider it.
Bob, go ahead.
Bob?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand this. So currently in the flat area, the monthly rate is $42.46 a month, and in the blended rate, it goes to $44.35 a month. So we're talking about an increase of $1.89 per month. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Is that with the offset if we reduce the franchise fee? Is that the one you're looking at?
No, I'm not looking at reducing the franchise fee.
Yeah, I'm looking at, so I'm sorry, Bob, what I've got 3 different rate sheets here. I think
I know, there's a bunch of them.
yeah, so the one that maintains the Flat Hill and tree, Christmas Tree Hill rates, which rates were you comparing, Bob?
I'm looking at page 4 of the staff report.
Oh, okay.
Section item 1 and item 2. Where
Yeah.
there's the tiered
Councilmember
rate
Rebozo?
format. Yeah.
The current rates are in parentheses next to the name of the rate area. So you can see it's 38.44 currently.
Okay, I'm reading this wrong.
The other column is what they're projected to increase to. But the current rates are in parentheses next to the name of the rate area.
So under the blended structure, the flat area would go up by about $6 a month. The hill area would go up by about $3 a month, and Christmas Tree Hill would decrease by about $9 a month. Yeah, Fred?
Yeah, I just have 2 questions. Just to clarify, because you were talking before about Christmas Tree Hill and Upper Summit, but when we're talking Christmas Tree Hill, the 78 homes or so, we're talking all of Christmas Tree Hill, correct? Not just those above the water tank on Summit?
No, we're just talking about above the, for us, Christmas Tree Hill only means above the water tank.
Okay. And then the other question also is that I think you mentioned that Belvedere, maybe Tiburon, there may be some other towns or cities that have gone to a blended rate.
Belvedere, yes.
When they went to a blended rate, was it this, and I know geographically they're going to be different than Corte Madera, was it the same kind of hit where the flatlanders are kind of having to absorb that initial cost? Did they go through the same type process?
It was exactly the same. The flat rate went up and the hill rate went down. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Are there any other questions from council members? If not, let's see. Todd and Jim, do you guys have anything more that you want to add before we open this up for public comment?
Yeah, again, I just, this is a conversation that council's tackled, over the years, and it's a tough one. But it's just been really clear from an operational standpoint of when you have, it's the way the contract was written in 2006. So when the cost of service of Corte Madera is X amount, you plug it into that formula, and the formula probably doesn't make sense at this point. And again, Christmas Tree Hill is impacted operationally, but again, it's only 78 residents. And so it would be an impact on the blended. If you blend it out to all residents, it's only 33 cents a resident. And so again, that's why we gave you this option instead of a different one. But again, it's a tough conversation.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question on the franchise fee issue, or are we going to treat that separately?
Go ahead and ask a question about it, and then when we bring it back to council for discussion, I think we'll talk blended or tiered rates first, then we'll talk franchise fee, and then we'll talk like final decision.
Okay. Jim, am I reading correctly that Corte Madera is assessing the second highest level of franchise fee in your whole operating district? Mill Valley being the highest?
Yes, that's correct. The 20% is, Mill Valley also charges 20%, but they charge a road impact fee on top of that. So theirs is a little bit more. So yes, second highest is correct.
We're also the second largest, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm sorry. I know it's in the staff report somewhere, but I'm having trouble locating it right now. How many households or customers do we have in each of the 3 different tiers right now?
Right. So we have.
I could answer that. I was actually prepared for that one. In the flat area, there's 1,528 residences. The hill area has 1,194, and Christmas Tree Hill has 78.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. Okay. Any other questions from council right now before we open this up for public comment? Okay, then we will go ahead and turn it over to the public. Members of the public, if you would like to comment on this issue, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. You can also email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Our first comment is going to come from Arlene.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Will there be the same difference for, or the same, oh, excuse me, I'm all messed up. We have a smaller can, garbage can. Will there still be the little bit lower price for the smaller can versus the larger can?
Yes.
So what will my increase be for my smaller can? Will it be the same amount as the larger can?
Percentage wise, yes. That is the way we always, yeah, if there's a 5% rate increase, it is that's applied equally to all of different levels of service, the 20-gallon can, the 32-gallon can, the 45-gallon can. They're all raised by the same percentage.
Okay, so if my quarterly rate is $98.07 and I have the smaller can, what is my quarterly rate going to be now with the increase?
$113.10.
That was quick.
$113.10. All right.
Okay, thank you, Arlene. Do you have anything else?
No.
Okay, thanks a lot. And thank you, Jim, for that quick math there. Our next comment is going to come from Michelle.
Hi, I'm wondering if there's extra liability costs for working up on the hill, insurance, those types of things, as you're working on a sloped, above on Christmas Tree Hill where you're speaking of, or any kind of slope.
No, not really. Our insurance costs are, the insurance company doesn't come and ask us where we're going. They just want to know what kind of trucks we're operating, and but they don't ask really the terrain that we're going up and down. No.
Jim, it's actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, as a point of order, can I ask Jim a question?
Yeah, please.
To clarify too to that. It's a good question by Michelle. Jim, have you seen any, can you speak to anything regarding accidents between the flats and the hill just over the past few years? If you look back at them, are there more in the hills on the flats? Is it pretty equal? Do you see any discrepancies?
I do not see, there's nothing in particular. I don't think we've ever done a study of it, so I can't tell you that there's a X amount of accidents up in the hills areas and as opposed to the flat. But just thinking about it, there doesn't necessarily, we've seen accidents happen everywhere, and they certainly happen in the flat. Our drivers sometimes sideswipe a car. Sometimes cars try to go around our drivers when they're trying to get to work and sideswipe us. So there's no real pattern of a greater number of accidents happening in the hills as opposed to the flat. No.
Thank you. Michelle, did you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Rebecca, yes.
Thank you, Mayor Beckman. I just wanted to point out real quickly for anyone attending the meeting virtually who is following along in the staff report, the blended rate structure is one of the attachments. It's page 14 of the PDF for this item, and it lists out the projected or the proposed quarterly and monthly rates should the council choose to go to the blended rate structure, and that 20-gallon can rate is the first line listed.
Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Our next comment is going to come from Lucinda.
Good evening. I had a couple of things that I was just curious about. How did this matter come up? It sounded to me that from Jim's comments that revenue neutral was the guiding principle. excuse me, but I'm just curious why this has been raised at this particular junction, given that we're trying to keep the revenue neutral.
I think in Belvedere, it just came up because a resident noticed the difference on the rate sheet and wanted to find out why there was that difference. And so I got contacted through the city council there and basically explained the same thing that I have done here tonight, that it's a historical thing back from the 1960s, and it just doesn't, it's an antiquated system that doesn't really apply anymore, especially after we went to curbside service. Most of the extra operating costs don't exist anymore. So I'm not sure that the city council actually of Corte Madera wanted us to look into this a couple of years ago. And I'm not sure where they, came up with the idea. Maybe did a resident, I'm not sure, Todd, who brought it to their attention, or if they just came to their attention on their own, that by looking at the rate sheet that there were these three different tiers, and they wanted to know why.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I may have an answer that will help Lucinda. It's not truly revenue neutral in the sense of we don't need to collect any additional, or that the company doesn't need to collect any additional revenue. There's significant pressure and upward cost push, staffing and the quality of the places where they can deliver the recycling. So the reason for any adjustment and change is those pressures for increased costs. And then the question is how we distribute it. And Jim's use of the phrase revenue neutral is to make sure that whatever solution they come up with will deliver the same revenue increase to the Mill Valley Refuse Service as any other option. So that's where the phrase is coming into play.
Okay, thank you, David. And I just want to clarify that this is still Lucinda's time to talk. So I paused her time for that. But Lucinda, I think you said you had a couple questions. So we'll anything that we didn't get to here, we'll try and get to in the discussion portion. But you've got about 45 seconds left. Were there any other questions that you wanted to ask, or any other public comment you wanted to make?
Yes, I have a little problem with going back and charging from July 1. I think that that's a little bit out of order, that all of a sudden we've decided that we're going to go back and charge more there. But I would like to also compliment Jim and his organization about the dual recycling. I think that has turned out to work quite well. And I think people seem to be buying into it pretty well. How is it going from your perspective is of interest to me. Thank you.
It is going well. That was one of the things that I brought up in my initial letter when we introduced the this year's rate application. We have been delivering cleaner loads of material to Marin Sanitary. They, especially the paper, the contamination from the paper has gone way down, and it has been, it's cheaper than paying the rate for processing has been lower than paying the rate for single stream. And of course, we're saving thousands of gallons of fuel by not having to drive up and down the highway to Redwood landfill with our recycling loads, which were then put on a transfer truck and taken to a processing plant down in San Jose. All in all, it has been a success, and people are catching on. And there was plenty of pushback in the beginning, but I think people are getting it, and and it's working out well. As far as I'm concerned, it's working out well as far as producing cleaner loads to Marin Sanitary, which was really one of the major goals.
And I think that that's admirable, but you also gave us the indication that costs have gone down because of the cleaner loads and the easier way of handling it. So here you're coming and asking us for an increase, but I mean, I don't understand how this can all be more expensive when you're saving money. And somewhere somebody has to put the stop on it. And I just don't understand why it's
right.
always going
and Lucinda,
up.
I'm sorry, but that is your 3 minutes. But if you have additional comments, please go ahead and email them to publiccomment@tcmmail.org so that we can include them. So I'm going to have to take you off now, Lucinda, but thank you for making your comments.
Could I just real quickly just say that those every year in the rate application, it's based on operating costs and revenues, and the reduced costs that we pay in fuel and tipping fee at Marin Sanitary are figured in to this year's rates. So the rates would actually be higher if those costs were higher. So there is the effect, I've got my dog here, the effect of doing the new recycling system has contributed to lower rates or lower increases, I guess.
All right, thank you, Jim. We're going to continue with public comment here. Next comment is going to be from Margaret.
Hi. I think it was about a year ago, I listened to the discussion about the dual stream recycling, and there was kind of a side discussion about the different rates at that time, and it was just comments, and I was surprised to find out about the different rates. And the person that was speaking commented about the different size trucks and the different load on the roadway, that Christmas Tree Hill and the hill areas, and not how much more, but that it was more expensive to do it. So I'm just trying to understand, has the story changed? Has the equipment changed? I can't believe that the same truck that comes down my 4-lane street on Prince Royal Drive is the same one that goes around in circles up the hill of Christmas Tree Hill. It seems pretty improbable that that would happen. And also, there was an earlier comment about how the rates might go up because the private pickups are supposed to be subsidizing the businesses that aren't as plentiful now. Those pickups aren't as revenue providing now. Did I get that wrong?
No, you got that correct. Both. First of all, your first point, we still have to use small trucks going up Christmas Tree Hill. So they are not the same, the larger trucks that you see down in the flat and other areas. So yes, Christmas Tree Hill still does have to be serviced in a more expensive way. However, once again, there are so few of them that if you blend them in with everybody else, the impact is, well, I'll call it insignificant. It's 33 cents a month difference in rate. So we didn't feel that separating them out and charging them a lot more really mattered that much. So that's why we think that blending all the rates together makes sense. I'm sorry, what was your other question? Was what now? I can't.
It was now I've forgotten it. I'm sorry, I don't remember it either.
I'm sorry, because I had an answer to it.
Oh no, it was that I heard you comment saying that because the business
Oh, yes, right.
has been,
That's right. Yes, it's true. Any typical route travels through the commercial area in Corte Madera and then moves off into surrounding residential areas. So commercial businesses pay a lot of for garbage service. They oftentimes have 2-3 times a week service. So they tend to subsidize in a great degree some of the costs of running a route to individual households. So when a business reduces services, or in the case of COVID, is not even operating anymore, it has a greater impact on the cost of operating that route than a single house reducing their service or not having service. And the only way that wouldn't impact everybody is if enough businesses went out that you could completely reduce or eliminate a route within Corte Madera. And we weren't able to completely eliminate a route within Corte Madera, only in overall all of our jurisdictions. So the effect of, just to bottom line, is the effect of dropping commercial revenue going down impacts residential rates more than the other way around.
All right, that is all the time we have for that comment. We're going to get to our last public comment here now. Thank you, Margaret. Our last comment is going to come from Richard.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Two things. One, and I apologize for not having read the documents if they're available, but the basis of the contract, is it a rate-based rate of return a la a utility? Is it a percentage of revenue? What's the general way in which that's determined?
It's a 10%. We get 10% over costs. That's our profit margin, but not every. There are certain limits to the things that we can call an operating cost, and some things are, we can take dump fees, for example. We're able to charge 10% over the dump fee up until a certain level, and then anything, if the dump fee rises higher than that, it becomes a straight pass-through. So that's how it works, and there are a lot of different things in the contract where it's sort of like doing a light item. Yes, we get to charge the 10% fee over the operating costs on that item, 10% on this item. No, this operating cost is a straight pass through. So it would be difficult without reading the whole contract to state how each operating cost is treated.
Okay, and then I just want to be cognizant of my time here. Just so my own information, I understand Christmas tree, but do the Hill residences also require the smaller truck, or are they using your conventional equipment?
Conventional equipment.
Okay. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you. There are no other hands up at this time. Rebecca, are there any emailed public comments about this item from folks who have not gotten a chance to speak?
No emailed public comments.
Okay, great. Then seeing no other hands up, we're going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it back down to the council for discussion. So we've got a couple items before us here. So why don't we start with a discussion on whether to stick with our tiered rates? Yeah, Fred?
Yeah, along the comment or question line, and I'm just trying to get this out there. What would happen if we went to going to the blended rate, but we did it over a 2-year period? So people aren't taking a large hit initially, but they theoretically, just looking at the numbers without anything else, they're taking an 8% increase this year and then an 8% increase next year. So we get to that blended rate, but it's not like such a huge impact, and we spread it out over 2-year period. I just want to get that out there.
I've got a way to do that.
Sorry, what, David?
I have a way to do that.
Yes.
I'm sorry, are you asking if I have a way to do that, or?
No, I have a way to do that. I'm going to suggest, and I think Todd may have some significant pushback to this from his tone of voice on another previous answer, but it strikes me that the bigger lever here is the franchise fee. And if we, for example,
okay, David, let's table the franchise fee discussion until after we talk about blended versus tiered rates, and then come back to that after we get through this item. So let's just focus right now on whether to stick with a tiered rate or do a blended rate, and then we'll discuss whether we want to tinker with the franchise fee or leave it be. So are there other comments that council members would like to make with regards to the narrow question of whether we stick with a tiered fee or switch to a blended fee? Blended meaning all houses pay the same rate regardless of where in Corte Madera they are. Any comments?
I've got a comment, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
My suggestion would be, based on the testimony that's been just offered up, that we combine the flat area and the hill area into a blended equal rate, and that we keep the more expensive upper Christmas Tree Hill higher, but that we not increase it. That is to say, we hold that one flat at the present rate. Now, Jim has said it only makes a few cents difference to the rest of the town to have that rate still be higher. But if the cost is higher, then maybe the rate should be higher, but unchanged for those particular 78 residents. By the way, I'm not one of them. And then blend together the flat and hill areas based on the representation that they have the same equipment and the same fundamental operating costs.
Okay, so you're suggesting neither of these two options, which are a 3-tier structure or a single fee. You're suggesting a two-tier structure.
That's correct. And
okay,
the higher tier we don't increase; we keep it flat.
Okay, I would imagine that would probably require rejiggering of all of the numbers in these spreadsheets,
Yes.
right? Because they're all trying to come out with the same
right.
thing. Okay. Any other comments from council members on the two items in the staff report or David's suggestion? Yeah, Bob.
I'm okay with the blended rate. While the percentage increase looks like it's a lot, the monthly, absolute dollars, it's not that big a deal. And, we got a lot of other stuff we should be dealing with, and I think we should just go ahead and roll with this and move on to the franchise fee. Thanks.
Anyone else want to comment on this?
So I also appreciate Jim's, like I said, honesty about what was going on with that. And ultimately it is about adjusting the contracts to new operational conditions that weren't termed in 2006. And because of the incremental increases, it's gotten out of the skew. And by saying that, then I feel more comfortable explaining to our constituents that that's really what we're doing, is making it right for a company that ultimately is somewhat controlled by the profit margins and stuff. This isn't a profit grab. This is people being paid for cost increases and stuff like that. But I do want to talk about that. So I could also support the blended rate. I wasn't originally, but I think in discussing it and truly understanding it, that I could embrace it now. But I do want to talk about other things associated with the increased fee. And I also wanted to address some of my thoughts on some of the comments that came from the public.
Okay, Charles, let's get these kind of miscellaneous thoughts after we discuss the franchise fee. So we'll come back to you for that. Thank you. Okay, anybody else want to comment on blended versus tiered? Fred, I don't think you've spoken on this yet. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, no. After listening to the comments, I think I also could support doing a blended rate. Again, initially I was thinking if we could do it over a 2-year period, so there's less of an impact, but I don't know how much a difference it would really make on the numbers. And I think what Charles said is right. If we go back 2006, those numbers were already skewed, where Christmas Tree Hill was already paying a higher rate, and now just bringing those rates into alignment on what they should be across the board.
Yeah, I agree, Fred, and I appreciated your kind of compromise solution that you floated there. I think you several times at several meetings you've had kind of good compromise ideas, but I agree with you that maybe in this case might not be necessary. I think I agree it makes sense to have a blended rate. I think one rate for all of town is fine. We've got 98% of the town, the cost of service is the same, and if it's only 78 residences for which service is more expensive, and it's 33 cents a resident more expensive, when you distribute it out amongst everyone else, it seems like it would be kind of weirdly punitive of us to try and charge these 78 residences more. So I agree. I think one rate for the entire town makes sense. I kind of like Charles, I came into this not so much opposed to like the rate structure, but really struck by the size of the increase. But thanks to the comments that we've heard and Jim's explanations and our great staff report, I think I'm understanding more now that my problem is not so much with the rate increases as with the entire contract. But these are the parameters that we're operating under. This is the contract we're in. It was negotiated in 2006, and we have to operate under those parameters for the time being. So I don't think that I really have I don't think that I see a valid argument anymore to oppose that. So with that, I think we can go ahead and turn the discussion to the franchise fees if staff feels that they have clear direction. Sounds like there's a consensus that we're going to go with a single tier, a blended rate. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and talk about franchise fees then. Any council member want to start us off on that discussion?
Well, if I could please, my
Sure.
proposal would be that we use a 16% franchise fee rate, which would cost us, or would the opportunity cost for the town is $205,000 less, but the underlying pressure for a rate increase for all of the residents of town during this difficult income year would be 3.12%, not 7.85%. Now, a refinement of that is that if Todd is going to tell us we really, really depend upon that $205,000, a refinement could be that for the first year or two, we go to a 16% franchise fee, and then we glide back up to the 20% fee equal to what Mill Valley has. But we are still, even at 16%, we are still the second highest recipient of franchise fees of all of the places that they do business.
Thank you, David. Anybody else want to comment on franchise fees? Charles?
Yeah, so one is I agree with Councilman Kuhnhart that I would like Todd, we approved the 2020 budget, just if there would be impacts in pulling back on that percentage. Also, I think you can't, the franchise fee is directly related to the rate increase, so I need to ask a few questions of Jim again to understand everything about the rate increase. I didn't ask it before, but as the conversation has moved on. So, the 7% increase, that's the contractual maximum that you're allowed. Is that correct, Jim? Or is it just as long as it was cost and it's within those line items, you can go as high as possible? So these are just absorbing costs that you've seen. Is that?
Yes, there is no theoretical ceiling for how rates could go. It's based on operating costs in that particular rate year. Okay,
and so it's redetermined in the rate year by a third party in conjunction. So I mean, what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of one-time cost related to new equipment upgrades and then also COVID, right? So, but my fear as a public official and someone that's approving fees that rarely have I seen in government get pulled back the next year, is, you know, basically if we do this increase, but then, you know, the issues involved with commercial and COVID go away next year, are we going to see a rate decrease? And if not, how do we,
have we ever seen a rate decrease?
Getting at that it blends out over a couple of years and we help you, but we also make sure that we have a fair rate in the long term between us.
Well, but that's exactly how it would work if, let's say, for example, that we come up with a vaccine and everyone, all the restaurants reopen and the shopping centers in Corte Madera completely reopen and garbage service levels rise to where they were. That would increase our revenue, and absolutely rates would go down or stay flat and there would be no rate increase. That could absolutely happen. We're looking at a 16% right now drop in revenue from commercial accounts alone. So if that 16% comes back, absolutely it would affect positively. This is not like a rate that is stuck in stone and we can slip away in the night without being called on it again. Just to every 3 years, an independent firm is hired, R3 Consulting, to come in and review our rate application and do an independent analysis of it. So that happens next year. Next year is the 3rd year. So any major changes are going to be, you know, they will be revealed in the next rate application. Okay. Another quick point about the, I'm sorry, but a quick point about the rates this year. Remember that even the blended rate is compressed into 9 months. And so it is already, starting next rate year, it is already going to be too high. It has to come down to be, because next year will be a 12-month period. So what is compressed into 9 months this year has to start out as what it would have been had it been 12 months this year. If that makes, if you're
I think Bob has a question about that. He definitely seemed a little confused by that.
No, I had a different question.
Okay, so sorry then, Bob. I just
that's all right.
So one of the other ones I wanted to deal with is the why it retroactively is going back. I just want to acknowledge that we requested that because of the unknowns that everyone was struggling with a few months ago, and we needed to see how it was going to play out, so that we didn't agree to too much cost or too little of cost. And basically by engaging in this kind of relationship of trust and delaying it, it was determined, and then ultimately the decision we are going to make about applying it retroactively is because of that time period that was granted to us in delaying the decision. So I think that it's nefarious. I just wanted to address like a public comment.
It's important to note that, it's very important to note that we are required to make our rate application in April, normally in April. It is studied in May, voted on in June, so that it can be applied to our July 1 billing, quarterly billing, so that it's for a year. Back in April, that's when this whole thing started, the COVID shutdown started, and by waiting 3 months, some economic activity has resumed, and it is actually a lower rate increase now than it was back in April. It was a full percentage point higher back then. It just seems like a lot now because unfortunately it's compressed into 9 months, but it is actually annually over the whole year lower than it would have been if we had not all waited the first quarter to see how much economic activity would resume.
Right. Okay.
Right.
And then I have one more question. And it's just more of a bigger business question. I'm sorry, everyone.
Go ahead.
20% with Mill Valley and Corte Madera were some of the larger population centers. Is that ultimately because of our negotiation power as a larger contract that we're able to negotiate those higher franchise fees? Or what do you find that ultimately, buoys a franchise fee, just for the public to understand it myself?
Franchise fees for us is a pass-through. So it just gets added. It's a franchise fee on top of the revenue. So it is I don't know, it's almost bad to say, but we don't, since it's no money in our pocket, whatever our towns want, we are, as in franchise fees, we are willing to pay because it is a pass-through. We don't put a, there's no profit margin for us on top of that.
Maybe we could talk more about it. Now I understand how it's processed and what it is and where it comes from. It's not.
Thank you, Charles. Great, thank you. We'll go to Bob and then Fred.
Yeah, I had a question for Todd. Todd and I spoke about this prior to the meeting about the franchise fee. And Todd, if you don't mind, can you just sort of reiterate your position on this? I'd love to hear that again. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Again, the council asked staff last year to come back and what are the options for franchise fees? And so we broke them down into 1% increments, but I'll speak to Vice Mayor Kuhnhart's scenario of a 16%, decreasing at 4 percentage points. So I think something that council has directed staff, big picture, to keep taxes where they are. If you look at the other cities and towns through COVID-19, unprecedented fiscally, right? There's just no comparison to what we're going through right now. A lot of the cities and towns are going back to tax measures. School districts are going to tax measures. The town, we're not, right? We're not just because we're flush with money, it's because that's the direction that council has given staff. So if we were to reduce our franchise fees, there's a cascade effect. Now think about the 2006 contract. So now we're how many years into this contract, right? How many decades? Are you ever happy and satisfied on either side with that contract? One side is probably really happy. We would negotiated this thing in 2006. So this isn't a new scenario, like we're just making money just to make money. This is a street impact fees are really the core of that 2006 agreement. These trucks cause damage to our infrastructure. And so we use within our budget, the franchise fees from the garbage rates, right? So we use that $850,000 to really pay for our engineering staff. Our engineering staff costs $1.2 million this fiscal year. That's what the core of that franchise fee goes to. It supports that. So if we were to reduce the fees, we could probably, we're doing everything we can to support our community. And we've been doing that over the last 4 months. There's gonna be a cascade effect on the backside. So ultimately what it would do is it could in fact impact engineering staff because I may have to reduce it then. It'll impact a project or two that we promised the community that's in our 5-year capital improvement project list. That's the impact of reducing these fees because every dollar goes to a specific thing. And I could talk about this all day long, but in a short, 2-minute response, you're touching something that really I just don't recommend we touch. Now, one of the things I was interested in because I didn't know, I wanted to know what 1% means. It's about $53,000. So if 1% is $53,000, what does $53,000 get us to reduce our per resident, the 28 households? What does that reduce in dollars and cents? It's a really low dollar amount. And so I think that's where I ultimately land, council, is it's not worth it. Don't touch the franchise fees. It's a flat rate. We haven't negotiated this thing since 2006. What a lot of cities and towns are doing, Larkspur was one of the recent ones, they had their franchise fees. They don't have Mill Valley Refuge. They have the Garbarinos, but a lot of them are negotiating street impact fees. Mill Valley is one of them that added on top of it. Well, we did that back in 2006. The council had forethought to do that. And so our rates, I would argue, if you look at our franchise fees comparable in the Bay Area, we're actually lower. We're lower than most. We're the second largest franchise fee in Mill Valley Refuse span of control. We're also the second largest population. And so at this point, when I look at the numbers and the charts that Jim and Rebecca put together for us, I don't recommend a reduction at this point in franchise fees. I don't think it's necessary. If it, you know, and I know the percentages are what they are, I just don't think it's, the cost benefit will again be engineering staff, raising taxes down in a different area, or projects that we promised our community. And I don't think there's a cost. My recommendation is the cost benefit doesn't raise to that level. So.
Thank you, Todd. Bob, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, that's it. I just wanted to reiterate that conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Fred?
Yeah, no, I just had the same question for Todd, so I appreciate his honesty and also clarifying that. And just to add to it, I think it's very easy for us to lower this fee, but it's going to be higher next year, or the year after, or the year after that to increase it back up again. And all of a sudden, we're not looking at $200,000. Down the road, we could be looking at $600,000 or $800,000. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Thanks.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that is just, it seems to me that with the discussion around reducing our franchise fee in order to create sort of the almost illusion or the appearance of a lower cost of collecting garbage is not, it feels like a budgetary sleight of hand, right? Because those fees are being assessed to address the impact that the garbage trucks have on our road, the degradation of the trucks on our road. If we don't collect those as franchise fees, we're just paying them out of our other pocket, right? We're paying those out of public works funds. So it's coming out of Corte Madera residents either way. And so I feel like to take that out of the franchise fee and say, oh, look, now garbage is cheaper to collect, it's not accurate because the cost to our residents is the same. Go ahead, Charles.
Thank you, Mayor. I completely agree with you. So I think that part of the reason that as the council, we are wary about assessing fees, even if it ultimately is paying for the infrastructure, is, you know, those most affected by COVID, right? And so with garbage rate fees, you know, I've always just paid. Ultimately, is there a program for low income or people that ultimately are in financial straits to provide garbage pickup at subsidized or lower rates like they do with PG&E and that kind of thing? So that way, the most at risk are still being taken care of, and ultimately this isn't going to have that big of an impact. The other thing I would suggest is that we stop talking about percentages, because percentages seem huge. When you talk about the actual dollars of $4 or $5 more or less, it's not nearly as overwhelming and scary, even in the big picture of all 9 months or a year spread out, compared to a lot of the tax initiatives and other things that we discuss and come up on ballots. So, you know, I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. So do council members have anything else to say about the franchise fees before we wrap this up with any comments that we have not gotten to yet? Anybody else want to say anything? Okay, so it sounds like, well, actually, I'm not sure. Is there a consensus then to not touch the franchise fees?
I do not want to.
I withdraw my request.
Okay, then there is consensus that we not touch the franchise fee. So now we can move to any remaining comments or questions that folks want to make, and then we can talk about the big question of the night, which is, do we accept this application for a rate increase? Do we reject it, or do we ask staff and MVRS to do a little more work and see if they can move a little bit more, you know, closer to each other on that? So do we have any other thoughts or questions from council members? I have one question that just came up to me, and I don't want to get too much into the you know, contract, since that's not exactly what we're here to talk about tonight. But I was just curious, Jim, has there ever been a rate decrease for Corte Madera?
I actually remember one.
2009.
2009, and what was that rate decrease?
Oh, I'd have to open the packet.
Do you have any sense? Was it big, little, medium?
You know, I can open it right now. But it was, and then in 15 and 16, I believe, there was no rate increase.
Right.
The decrease was 3.1%.
Okay. Okay, so that
It can happen.
Sorry,
it can happen. It can happen. It doesn't happen often, and when it does, it's apparently small, but it sounds like it can happen. So another question I had for you, just based off the contract, you had told us that your profit by the contract is more or less pegged at 10%. Is that 10% a minimum, or is that what your profit is pegged at? So in other words, if your profit were looking like it was trending above that, would we get money back? Would our residents get money back? Or a lower fee next year or something?
It would be a lower fee next year if everything were to remain the same. But it's entirely plausible then that you may have or have had years where your profit spiked above that 10%, and that was just what it was for residents. More often, in fact, almost always, it is lower than the 10%.
Okay. I appreciate you letting me know.
That 10% is not guaranteed. And you'll remember just a couple of years ago that we lost $500,000 when we were hit with the recycling, the skyrocketing recycling fees. We were not able to recover our losses from that year. We were only able to say in the next year, these are our new operating costs, because that's the new
right after National Sword.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from council members, or do we want to go ahead and discuss the big question of whether to accept this application here? On the with the conditions that we've discussed, that we will move to a single blended fee for all of Corte Madera, and we will not touch the franchise fees. Other than that, yeah, Fred, go ahead.
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we accept the rate increases based upon the blended rate, which I think is option number 2, and we do not increase the franchise fees, or we don't touch those. We leave them the way they are.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second that.
Thank you. Rebecca, can we have a vote, please?
Yes. Councilmember Casissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Jim, for being here tonight. We appreciate your honesty and the wealth of information that you bring. It's really helpful to us in trying to make these difficult decisions. So thank you.
Thank you all. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks.
All right, that brings us to item 5B, which is consideration and possible introduction of an ordinance amending Title 18 of the Corte Madera Municipal Code to establish a new approval process for town projects currently subject to that title.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
I just wanted to get clarification from Rebecca that we had a resolution and we just took a motion. Do we need to go back and approve the resolution? And if so, it would need to have the appropriate rate sheet attached.
Yes, I was just going to ask about that too.
Great. Okay.
The resolution.
Resolution 31, 2020.
Correct. Was titled a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Corte Madera increasing by 7.85% the maximum rate for the delivery of solid waste collection terms and conditions and dual stream recycling services by Mill Valley Refuse Service Incorporated, effective July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2021.
So
we would have to attach the appropriate, I'm sorry.
I was asking if that was the blended rate, but it sounds like we would need to attach.
So Exhibit A should be, we'd need to have the appropriate rate attached at its Exhibit A. So it would be the resolution with the blended rate structure, which is in, Jim, maybe you can help me. This is attachment 3.
It is attachment
Page 4.
blended rate structure.
It's page 14 out of 65.
Okay, mine are not numbered. So this is the one that is at the top. It says blended rate structure and it's
Correct.
attachment 3.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And would there actually need to be an amendment to the resolution to specify that the council is adopting a blended rate structure? I don't think tiered rate structure is
wrong language.
called out in the resolution. So I don't know if we need to change anything within the resolution.
I would suggest one sentence that hereby approves the increase in base rates as set forth in Exhibit A. This is the second page, paragraph 1. And I think what I would suggest is we add to that increase in base rates as set forth in Exhibit A as a blended rate that will apply to all residential customers within the town. Jim,
Okay.
does Jim have any concerns? Is Jim still on?
He may have left
the meeting.
Rebecca, does that jive with your understanding of what we're doing here?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
so
what I would
will
recommend.
Where is this sentence added? The second page?
In the second page, paragraph, there are 3 lines, 1, 2, and 3.
Correct.
And in the first, it currently reads, the town council hereby approves the increase in base rates as set forth in Exhibit A. And I would add to that as a blended rate that will apply to all customers within the town.
All residential curbside customers?
Yes, residential curbside customers.
Okay, do we need to revote?
Probably.
Yes, and then Exhibit A will be that blended rate that we already identified.
Okay, great. So I will entertain a motion on resolution number 31, 2020 with those modifications that the town attorney just enumerated.
So moved.
Okay, we've got a motion. Is there a second? Great. Thank you. Rebecca, can we have a vote, please? It looked like Fred, sorry.
Was there a verbal second? Okay. Councilmember Casissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you. So we will now turn to 5B. I will not read the title again. I will not subject everyone to that. Adam, when you are ready.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to start off because I think it's important for the council and the community to understand how this came about and why this is before you today. And so section 18.02.090 of the current municipal code provides that town zoning ordinance title 18 applies to most projects to construct or alter a structure or town property in the same manner as similar projects on property not owned by the town. In evaluating the town's proposed town hall remodel and addition project, both myself and the town attorney have identified concerns about applying the town's general land use entitlement process to the town projects, including the town hall project. And so there's a recent planning commission meeting where a resident made a comment about potential litigation. And so at the end of that meeting, the town attorney contacted me and brought some concerns forth before me about the process if someone were to appeal a town project, and really then getting into this section of identifying the appropriate process moving forward. And so the town attorney can speak for herself. I'm going to turn it over to her in a second. But I felt strongly enough as the town attorney that we needed to do something about this. And so the timing is quick because again, we have town projects coming before the council and really we're concerned about having the right process. And so with that, this is before you. We then brought in Adam Wolf. He's our planning and building director. And we asked Adam to give us his expert opinion on process of what he would recommend. And so how I'd like to go about this is turn this over to Teresa so she can speak on her concerns because she initially raised them. And then we'll turn it over to Adam so he can walk us through this process of what this is or isn't. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Teresa.
Okay, thank you, Todd. So really, the current process, there are some shortcomings in the current process that you have, and as you all know, that the process that we use and that is used when you have a third party who's seeking some sort of land use entitlement is set forth in Title 18, and it really ends up being a quasi-judicial process where you are applying the zoning rules and criteria to a particular applicant or to particular property in order to determine really the only issue you're determining is whether or not the zoning criteria is met for a project that the third party has decided that they want to do as a project owner. And so the difficulty when we're talking about a town project is that that process really doesn't provide an opportunity for the town as the owner of the project to go through that same process that a private project owner would have before they ever came forward to the town asking for a land use entitlement. So weighing things like, what is the project? What do we want here? What are our needs? What are the options? And what are the costs? And so when you have a private entitlement project coming forward or a request for an entitlement, those issues have been addressed by the project owner. So one of the shortcomings with applying the same sort of narrow zoning criteria to the town project is there really isn't a good opportunity for you all as essentially the body that will decide what this project is going to look like to think about what you want the project to look like. And certainly as a public project, there are lots and lots of policy considerations that you may want to look at and weigh and consider that are above and beyond the simple question of zoning criteria. So that was one of the shortcomings that really I was looking at and really trying to figure out where does that come into the process. And so the other difficulty is, of course, if you are applying sort of this quasi-judicial process to a town project, and you do end up with an appeal, you end up with a little bit of an unworkable circumstance where an appeal ultimately could come to the town council on a project that is the town's very project. And so there are some challenges with applying that sort of quasi-judicial process when you're talking about a town process. So with that, really my recommendation is for the town to adopt not a quasi-judicial process, which is what you currently have, but really a legislative process, which is one where you factor in all of the relevant policy decisions that you think should go into making a decision about what to do with a particular project, the benefits, the costs, the whole litany of considerations that might go in. And the staff report that we put together really outlines what some of those kinds of considerations would be when it comes to any town project, but certainly the town hall project with its magnitude really typifies and maybe exemplifies of the whole host and spectrum of kinds of interests that could come into play, which could include the operational functionality and efficiency of the project, its ability to address broad community needs and services, its ability to fulfill the town's long-term vision and implement long-range plans, its perceived value to the public, and its ability to be funded, all within the context of competing town financial and policy priorities. And so really the weighing of those different policy options, as I said again, is really the hallmark of a legislative process. So with that, my recommendation to Todd and now to you is to really adopt an appropriate legislative process that provides the level of transparency that you want in this decision-making process, but ultimately gives the town council the ability to make these decisions and move forward with the project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam, and he can talk about the new process that he is recommending that you use, which fulfills those criteria.
All right, thank you, Teresa, and good evening, Mayor and council members. Just following up, as you've just heard, really what I was trying to accomplish was to think of what would be the appropriate new process for review and approval of town projects. And just to be clear, I think importantly, what we have before you tonight is a ordinance number 999, actually. That is in your staff report as attachment A or attachment 1, I believe. And so there's a clean version in there, and then there's also a red line version in attachment 2. We also made some really non-substantive changes to that ordinance earlier today, and I think that was distributed to you and to the public by the town clerk earlier today. But we're talking about a change to the zoning ordinance, and as Todd mentioned and Teresa mentioned, currently the code says that town property or projects on town property is subject to the zoning ordinance. So the alternative process that we're talking about, and I think it's important also to explain that, give some examples of the types of projects that we've recently seen in the past that have actually been subject to the zoning ordinance. So we're talking about things like, if you recall, the dog park that went through the zoning ordinance and went to the planning commission as a conditional use permit. We had, I think, the trellis structure down at Town Park Plaza that went through and to the planning commission as a design review project. The new digital marquee that also went to the design review to the planning commission. Those are the types of things. That's how we process things in the past. So an alternative process really, and just real quick, it doesn't apply, this would not apply to projects that are not currently subject, town projects that are not currently subject to the zoning ordinance, such as things as infrastructure improvements in the town right away. That's not what we're talking about here, with this very small exception of right away that actually is zoned on our zoning map. But I want to be clear about that. So the alternative process that we are talking about for town projects now, there are really two clear goals that, when I thought about this, that we wanted to achieve. And first, we didn't want to lose any of the public meetings or the noticing requirements that town projects are currently required to have pursuant to the zoning ordinance. I think these meetings and noticing requirements, they do play a really important role in vetting town projects in a transparent and public way. And the planning commission and staff, planning staff, play an important role in incorporating community feedback and addressing issues related to the project's design and operation and or the environmental impacts associated with the project. So we wanted to keep that general framework in place. Second, though, as Teresa discussed, we wanted to get out of this quasi-judicial process, and we wanted to make sure that the final decisions on town projects were made by the town council, or for smaller projects, the town manager, and that such decisions were not evaluated only through the sort of relatively narrow lens of the zoning ordinance and its findings, but through the much wider lens that allows for consideration, as Teresa talked about, of other competing policy and financial priorities that really are part of any evaluation of a town project. And I think Teresa talked about those with community needs and services. So the result really is that we proposed a process that tries to mirror what the zoning ordinance actually currently has in terms of process with respect to all the public meetings and the public noticing that are currently required for town projects. And in fact, what we've actually come up with, and I feel is appropriate, is that because we're ending the process at the town council or for purposes of projects that may have been previously approved at the town staff level, we're now taking it to the town manager level. We're actually adding another level of public review for town projects, which comes along with also public noticing as well. And so I can get into this a little bit. I have a brief, sort of hopefully brief presentation that tries to diagram this a little bit, so I think it's a little easier to understand. But again, it's really getting out of this quasi-judicial and narrow decision-making of the zoning ordinance and opening it up to the full range of policy considerations that are appropriate. So I'm going to try to share my screen real quickly and just walk through what I have here. So let's see if I can get you on this. So hopefully, can you all see that?
Yep.
this is sort of an outline, and I'll walk through a little bit. I know there's a lot of arrows and whatnot here, but I want to be also really clear at the outset that what we're talking about is actually the formal process of once an application, currently in the zoning ordinance, once an application actually gets to either planning staff or the planning commission, this, from that point forward, is what we're talking about. As you know, we do a lot of, for town projects and even private development projects, there's a lot of community outreach that happens way before the development of even a project application. And for example, with the town hall and the remodel and addition project, everything to this point is sort of in the gray area, as you see in this slide, which is the community outreach. So we haven't even started that, the formal process of a land use review or project review of that project. So the other thing to note on really central to this whole process, it's similar to a project application. We're calling it a town project report. And that is going to include a lot of information that you would see in a project application, and I'll get into that in a second. And you'll see basically the bold sort of rectangles are the double line rectangles are the final decision makers in this process. And you can see that the town manager in certain limited circumstances would have that ability, which is sort of relates to the planning director or planning staff's current ability to approve certain design review projects and whatnot. And then the town council obviously would be the final decision maker for the majority of projects. And I'll get into this in a second. So just to describe the town project report, there's a lot of information that actually is built into the ordinance itself that would require this amount of information. And at a minimum, these sorts of things would be in the project, the town project report. And so this obviously is something that's developed by staff. It may be the director of public works, if it's on, or the director of parks and recreation. Ultimately, they would be the ones who would be at the very bottom. They would be making a statement of recommendation of approval or request for determination on that project. But obviously there's a lot of other information that goes in that town project report. And then it goes to the planning director, and the planning director would basically have three options in referring this town project report. All of them, so if you see there's limited circumstances where it would go to the town manager. And that would be in the case where it's projects not involving a significant policy issue or public controversy. And sorry for that spelling mistake there. But if it was a project that was within approved spending authority, that would be that route there. There would be another route that would go straight to the town council with this town project report. And again, we're talking for something like the marquee or the trellis structure, or we'll talk about at the end of this presentation, the town hall remodel and addition project. This route would go to the town council, straight to the town council. And there's also the more common route would go straight to planning commission, which is by at least our experience since I've been the planning and building director and acting as the planning director for the town. I think all but one town project that I can recall, which is very small, sort of modification to windows on the community center, went directly to the planning commission. So that would be the majority of them. And I'll walk through each of these a little bit. I just wanted to note before the planning director would refer to the town manager, in this case, there would be a notice to the public. Again, same thing with the town council. And then prior to any planning commission meeting, there would be a notice as well, public notice. This is the scenario when it actually goes to the town manager. And again, that would be a limited number of cases. But the town manager would then receive the report, and then prior to making any decision on the town project, and again, if it was within the town manager's approved spending authority, that a decision could be made there. But prior to doing so, there would be another opportunity for public notice. And then at the discretion of the town manager could also forwarded on to the town council for final decision, or forwarded on to the planning commission, who would then make a recommendation to the town council. All of these I'm just keeping in the public noticing, you'll see in red at all stages of this process. If it went straight to from the planning director to the town council, same, there would be a public notice before the town council meeting in that circumstance. And again, there are a limited number of situations in which that would occur. And then the most common way that decisions would be made on town projects would be that it actually does go to the planning commission and then gets forwarded on from the planning commission. After obviously the planning commission meeting, they would hold a meeting just as they do today, but it would not be in the sort of at the end of their decision would be a recommendation to the town council rather than an actual sort of resolution that makes the findings and so on. So again, they would make this recommendation, and they're making a recommendation strictly as it's outlined in the ordinance on the project's ability to meet zoning criteria, and we can get into that a little bit of what that is. That's essentially an evaluation of how the project would have otherwise met the findings of the zoning ordinance or not, if it was subject to the zoning ordinance. And it would make a recommendation on the CEQA determination, and that would get to the town council as well. So again, this is back to the full outline. I just wanted to sort of show you how it's a comparison between what we're proposing, and then currently this is the process essentially that we have today. And again, so it's shifting out the decisions from the planning director and the planning commission to the town manager and the town council, but leaving in place still essentially the evaluation process by the planning commission and the planning director, taking away sort of this appeal process that is in play today and turning it into strictly a legislative policy decision without the opportunity for appeal. So that's what I have, and I'm hopefully, sorry, was I sharing the notes view? I guess.
No, you got it.
So that's, I'll stop sharing my screen. Let me see. Let's see if I can, sorry. Let's see.
And while Adam's doing that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'll just jump in regarding the town manager spending authority, and like when, under this scenario, it's very limited. It would be like the bocce ball courts. My spending authority is tens of thousands of dollars. It isn't hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's very limited. So it'd be maybe the marquee sign. Even that, I wouldn't. Yeah. I would still take that to the planning commission because it's a sign and it's the marquee sign. But like bocce ball courts would be the example that I would give, that I would probably under this scenario approve. Through the process, but it's very limited. So I just want to really make that clear.
Right. And I think I want to be, that's important to note. I think the other one that I mentioned that planning department staff actually approved at a staff level before, and this is similar to what we're talking about, was just a change to the paint color and some window modifications at the community center, something like that. That was something that really, was not going to generate a lot of issues so we went ahead and proved that again with public notice as well. But so it's not that it's not done in a vacuum. But in any case, that's the process. I want to also just state, and it's in the staff report. If I did go back, for the town hall remodel and addition project, what this would mean would essentially be the next step would be the development of a town project report. That would be the stage where we were at. We've done the study session. We've done a lot of outreach. We would develop that report, and then we would have that evaluation and meeting at the planning commission to discuss that. And then it would ultimately be recommended, or a recommendation would come out of the planning commission and be sent to the town council for its ultimate decision. And so with that, I will open it up to any questions you may have, and happy to get into any of it further. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to all three of you. Do we have questions from the council?
Yeah, just for clarification, because when I read this, it says town project, it's under section B. Town project means the construction or alteration of a structure, I think on town-owned property. So something like the bocce ball course, to me, it's not a structure, so this would not apply. Or even like the dog park, where we're not touching on, I'm looking more like it's, to me, it's structure, and there's no structure for the dog park or bocce ball course. So does that mean under that scenario, those two projects would not apply to this?
Yeah, I mean, so this gets back, and this is also something why we really just wanted to mirror the zoning ordinance. And when the zoning ordinance gets kicked in today, it's very broad on a lot of the zoning districts in parks and in community, basically our public, semi-public districts. It's any structure. So there, I would hesitate to say that you can build a bocce ball court without a structure, but maybe that's the case. You know, it gets into very detailed look at that. But if it's any structure that alters, we actually have the zoning requires that it's a modification to structures or site on which that structure is located on town property, for example, then it kicks it in. So, you know, it's a very low bar to be a town project. And so it's things like we had, you know, again, without seeing the actual proposal, it's hard to say, but things like the shade structure over the playground was a structure that actually triggered a design review under our current ordinance. So we wanted to mirror that. We didn't want to monkey around with actually what the thresholds are in this process. We're happy to do that. And I think when we talked about the design review thresholds, we talked about making a little bit more of changing that to be a little bit more less restrictive in terms of what would qualify as design review. And if we did that, we would also come back and look at this as well, I think, and sort of mirror again, whatever the threshold we're looking at for design review.
Okay, I guess I just got hung up where it says structure. I'm thinking structure, not like a bocce ball court thing or a fence at the dog park. Another question for you also is that I believe part of Town Park and Cove, we have joint use agreements with the school district, and same thing with Reed School District for Granada Park. If it's a joint use agreement, and again, Teresa may know this better than I would, or Adam, technically, does that mean it's not town-owned property? So if all of a sudden we wanted to do something on that part of the park or it's under a joint use agreement, would this not apply?
No, I think my understanding is those parcels are town property. They maybe have a shared use agreement, but you know, and somebody may know this better than I, but we essentially go to the fee interest in it, I guess, is what we talk about, right, Teresa?
Yes, yes. The fact that someone else is using it or leasing it or wouldn't make a difference. If it's owned by the town, it's subject to this if it otherwise fits that definition.
Okay, and then the last question, just for clarification, even I know these are far and few between. I think I read in here where if there's a project that's in budget, that Todd, basically you could approve that, so it wouldn't need to go to Planning Commission or eventually to Town Council, and there's notices provisions built in there. But if you did approve something and somebody wanted to appeal it for whatever reason, is there an appeal process? And I know it may be low risk, because you're right, we're not talking mega projects, tens of thousands of dollars, but is there anything in there, or does it need to be anything in there like that? And it may be far and few between.
Teresa, you want me to answer? I mean, there would be no appeal after the final decision. So the town manager's decision would be similar to the town council's decision in that case, in that it's actually a final decision in terms of that particular project.
Okay, and I assume that by providing, I think the 10-day notice before that decision by the town manager would be made, that would give the people at that point in time the opportunity to provide comments and make modifications at that point in time.
Yeah, and in fact, and then I think the idea would be, and this is similar to how we handle our own staff level approvals at this point. We'll send out a notice, and if we hear comments, we may kick it to the Planning Commission because we think it's a more appropriate venue to actually have that discussion. Similarly, that discretion is built into the town manager where it could go to the town council It doesn't have to stay with the town manager, even though it goes down that arrow, that path. The town manager has the discretion to move it on to the planning commission or the town council.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Eli, just one last question.
Yeah.
Are there other towns and cities within Marin that have adopted similar ordinance to this one?
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner. I'm sorry, council member, because he's,
The old days.
I meant to mention that, it's not that we have, I think other cities, what they've done is they've actually explicitly exempted particular projects from their zoning ordinance. So, Tiburon Library, Tiburon Town Hall, the Novato recent, their building services building and staff building, those were all not built in accordance with our zoning or with their zoning ordinances. And I think in those cases, what we found is that their existing municipal codes were silent on the case in the matter. Our municipal code actually explicitly said that our town projects were subject to our zoning ordinance. So we felt it was appropriate actually to, if we were pulling ourselves out of that, to develop a new process for all town projects that we would now abide by. And it would also, I think it's helpful for clarity in moving forward that there's what the expectations are. And so, I haven't found a specific sort of something very similar to this. But in terms of other projects whether they have sort of been subjected to their own city's zoning ordinances, yes, that hasn't happened in the majority of more significant town projects.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you, Fred. Any other questions from council members on this? I just had one quick question, just a clarification. So just to make sure, so major substantial projects would still be going before the planning commission, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't have any other questions. If no other council members have questions, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. So members of the public, if you'd like to comment on this item, please go ahead and put your hand up through Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Rebecca, have we gotten any emailed public comments on this?
We have, we received one email from Michelle Miller, who currently has her hand raised. So
okay, great. Perfect. Okay, so we will let Michelle speak in person and then we'll go to Carl.
Hi, thank you. I feel like the first couple of questions were answered about why this is necessary and why now. I have a question about what was currently presented and what is the delineation between a large and a small project? And I'm hearing that it doesn't apply to the current town hall project. And if you could speak to that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Teresa, would you recommend that we save these for the discussion rather than getting into a back and forth with public comments like we were kind of doing with the garbage rate discussions, or what do you recommend?
I would, if you prefer to let the person speak and then clarify by speaker, you could do it that way, or we could do with the clarifications later. But I think I would recommend not doing a back and forth while the speaker is still going.
Okay, so Michelle, if you have any other points or questions that you'd like to ask right now, let's go ahead and get those all out, and then we'll ask staff to really briefly respond before we move on to the next public comment. Did you have any others?
Okay, no, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. In that case, staff, please go ahead.
Well, okay. Just to, the second part of that, I think just to clarify, what we're saying is the new process that is outlined and defined in this ordinance number 999 would apply to the town hall remodel and addition project. So yes, it would. And sorry, the first part of that again was, just remind me if you can, somebody.
I think it was where's the divider between large and small projects?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and this is one of the cases where we mirrored the current decision-making process that's in our zoning ordinance. So right now, the zoning ordinance says it delineates the threshold for when a project is required to basically seek a planning entitlement. And then it gives the discretion to the planning director. And actually it says the planning director shall, in cases where there's a substantial public controversy or what is the other language? So I'm trying to get the well, it's not a bright line. There is no define. It's let me make sure I can.
Adam, are we talking about between big at the designating between a big project and a small project? I mean, wouldn't it really be cost? I mean, the spending authority of staff is anywhere from $50,000 to $75,000. So you can then compare that to a project. It's a very small project in recent memory.
I think it's actually, yeah, and I think, thank you, yeah, but it's more than that. We've had very small projects that trigger a planning commission review because it's controversial and it needs to be having maybe a public vetting in front of the planning commission rather than sort of in a staff review where we sort of do the review there. So I think why, I'm just trying to explain, I guess, why there's not that bright line is because, again, we're just really trying to mirror the exact process that's outlined from that standpoint in the zoning ordinance today. Could we make modifications to that in the future? But possibly, but it's really, it leaves it up to currently to the planning director to make that decision, and in the future it would similarly be done by planning staff or the planning director, and then the town manager to make that call of whether it raises to the level of being reviewed by the planning commission and then the town council. And as Todd said as well, it's also a spending question as well. It's a monetary question. If it's not outside of the spending authority, approved spending authority of the town manager, then it definitely will go to either the town council or the planning commission.
If I can just add that the ordinance, in addition to the spending authority threshold, even if it's within the town manager's spending authority, it provides that it can be referred to either the planning commission or the council as appropriate if there is a significant policy issue or substantial public controversy.
Thank you. That's so, and that's the same language that's in our design review, in our zoning ordinance today with respect to design review or variance and conditional use permits, etc. So.
And I would think as a check and balance, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you got the two-pronged threshold, right? You have spending authority, which we talked about what it is, 50 to 75,000 right now. That'll be coming to the council in the future. And then also the controversy, is it something that should go through, the planning commission or the council? And I'll tell you that because it's not something that would be that you could be appealed if I did do that as a town manager. Ultimately the council holds the town manager accountable for his or her decisions. And so that's the check and balance, right? And by practice, I think we've been pretty conservative on pushing things to the planning commission and going through the process. And so I feel that's important to say too, as part of this conversation. So.
Great. Okay. Thank you. With that, we will move on to our next public comment, which is going to be from Carl.
Hey folks, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Hey, thanks for the discussion. I'll just clarify my thoughts into about 2 or 3 points. We don't have to go back and forth because I'm sure we'll talk about them. But first of all, is the optics of what you're proposing. It could be very easy for folks to view this as, a get out of jail free card. Let's go develop Park Madera Center and, we're just going to do what we want to do. Removing the appeals process is going to be it's going to be a bad optics on that front. As far as fuzziness between what a project might go the short route versus the normal route, it can't really be fuzzy. I think you're going to have to be real clear about that because that'll clear up a lot of that. The last thing is when you talk about people being noticed, I'm assuming you're talking about noticing the entire town. And so that's one thing. The other thing is just on your flow chart, you have the community outreach before the project design or project report. So what are people going to see in the community outreach if you haven't written the report yet? So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl. Great points. There are no other hands up at this time, so we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion and eventually a motion. Who would like to start us off on this discussion? Somebody wants to, I know it.
Perhaps because I'm the tiredest, I need to go first. So,
okay, go.
I would like to say that as far as optics are concerned, and this speaks to the same question or concern that Mr. Spurzum has put forward, it actually, to me, is it's the opposite of us trying to get away with something or getting out of jail free. And I have to congratulate Adam once again for putting together a process that has a lot of transparency and a lot of points of review, where what I think is being recommended here is not to get away with something, but rather to make it even more explicit that an important project on town property really is the responsibility of the elected body. And not only is it going to be our responsibility to make that decision, and that decision will have all the many dimensions that Teresa spoke of values and cost benefit analysis and so forth. But it will also not be merely what can somebody do within a predefined box of zoning expectations, but rather what can we do within our imagination and our plans for the future with town property. I think we are going to have both Planning Commission and Town Council involvement, and as Adam pointed out, and this just makes it really clear that it doesn't only come to the council if there's an appeal. It is going to come to us. So it's much more forthright. I think it adds a layer of review, and it adds a layer or it adds the opportunity for a much more complex analysis. I think it's a really well prepared presentation, and I'm in favor of this 999.
Thank you, David. Who else would like to speak? I'll go. Oh, Bob, were you raising your hand? Okay. Well, so I'll just say, I totally understand the need for this. The way our system is set up right now, right? We have basically a system where the town council is appealing its own projects to itself, and that is unworkable on its face. So I agree that I think staff has done a nice job of finding a solution. That what I like about this is that they create a legislative process that really mirrors the process that we have now. So like, substantially nothing is changing. It just legally it works. So I think that's much better. I am sensitive to what Carl brought up, which is the optics of removing appeals. And I guess I'm trying to figure out if there's a way, like obviously we're not going to be appealing this to a body outside of Corte Madera, that wouldn't make sense. So I don't know if maybe we want to consider adding in, not an appeal per se, but like some sort of like second go, like it can be brought back to the town council, but I don't even know what would trigger that, right? Because I mean, it's like there's no project that happens in town ever that 100% of people like. So you can't set it up obviously where any one person who doesn't like it can bring it back. So I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts there, happy to hear them. But by and large, I'm pleased with what's been laid out here. Yeah, Charles.
So in any good public project, it should always reflect the public's interest, right? So we should never be doing anything, whether we have carte blanche or not, in public properties like the shopping center, to whatever a group of elected officials are. And the other thing is, we're all elected officials. We're held accountable by the Brown Act, and we're not going to collude to do something that's not in the public's best interest. So that is the legislative process, and there is recourse if ultimately we don't reflect our constituents and represent the body politic of the town. So, and I I've seen it happen here in many other places where if you don't, you're out. So that in itself is the accountability. Ultimately, it comes to us to make that decision anyway. It's about, to me, it's not the same thing, but like, to me, it's like a double jeopardy thing. And ultimately, we're just taking the burden of saying that we, through all the evidence, feel it's best, and we're the, and we don't want the appointed people that we've had to review it before to ultimately make it a challengeable thing. Like, we just want to have it reside in us, which was the power that was always granted to us when we were elected. And so therefore, I would say I'm comfortable with this. I do, and I have encouraged staff to really add all those checks and balances to the process so that the optics are very much open, and that if there are very vocal or opinionated residents that ultimately have issues with it, that we will openly vet it and address those concerns before it comes to us. And if that's not happening, then that's a bigger problem about our communication plan and a bunch of other stuff. So, and we should be alerted to that if ultimately it's going that direction, right? So, but in this instance, I've reviewed the legal terms and, the processes that Adam is working through, and I'm comfortable with supporting it because I feel like this is an issue for 10,000 people and not the individuals that are affected next door to larger public projects. And it gives that oversight and ability to basically make those decisions as an elected official. So, yeah.
Thank you, Charles. Bob?
Yeah, I would largely agree with both of those comments. And I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but I think the critical thing here is this does put more pressure on the council to really review projects and make sure that we're doing it correctly, that we're doing it thoroughly, that we're listening to the public, and that we're taking care of all that. It doesn't just get bounced to us if there's an appeal. And I think that's critical. So it's actually, I think, creating more involvement on the council's part and creating more oversight. But I do think, to Carl's point about optics, we just have to be really careful about how we explain this to the public and how we present this, because it can come off as we're just eliminating the appeals process, which we're not. I think we're actually creating a new process which is more thorough and more complex and more evaluative and will help us get to better decisions. So I'm all for this. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, Fred.
Yeah, I can support passing this also. I think it fills a legal void that we've been missing. So it fills that hole. And from what I've seen for projects in Corte Madera, I think our residents are very good about coming out on projects. And I think staff has done, I know we're working on communication plan to enhance like getting communications out to our residents. So I think that is piece of this also. But I've seen the projects where they're really vetted by people with multitude of opinions, which I think just helps the overall project. And it seems like the documentation, what's necessary to package, I think it's called, the project plan. I think there's a lot of documentation in there, and it's coming from multi-facets, which again, I think that just helps everything, and it packages it into one neat package. So again, I can support it. And I appreciate staff's time on this.
Thank you, Fred. Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is just to reiterate, like you just said, this is being done because the town attorney identified a legal void, as Fred put it. And as we heard from staff, other cities have made this change already because the prior, the system that we have currently doesn't work. So it's, this is not something that is being done, like voluntarily, really. It's not something that's being done, with any sort of motive to like make our own lives easier. It's just the system that we have doesn't work. And so that's, I think, an important thing to keep our eye on here is that dynamic. And with that, it sounds like we are all in support. So I will entertain a motion if somebody would like to make one.
I would very much like
go
to
ahead
offer.
David.
I was going to offer forward that we approve on the first hearing ordinance number 999 of the town of Corte Madera, adopting amendments to Title 18 of the Corte Madera Municipal Code to establish a new approval process for town projects currently subject to that title.
Mr. Mayor, if I may clarify that,
yes, please,
that the ordinance is
Yes, the one that was circulated today with redlining. It's dated today, so it's the 1st of September.
And it's introduction, correct? Yeah. Introduction.
Yes.
Great. Okay, all good, Teresa?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
I'll second
And
it.
Fred? Perfect, thank you, Fred. Rebecca, can we have a vote, please?
Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you. There are no business items, so that brings us to council reports and town manager reports. We'll start with the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll keep it quick so the vice mayor can go to bed. But I want to start off by commending Adam for his haircut. He looks really good today. He got a lot of public comment on our last community meeting about his hair. So good job, Adam. You look good. I didn't want to bring it up in the Mill Valley Refuge discussion, but I want to point out, you know, this is just 2020 is probably a year that we all want to forget about. But we actually had a Mill Valley Refuge service driver die this year on a rollover accident off of Meadow Sweet. And I just, you know, just add to all the horrors that we've seen this year. I just wanted to mention that, but we've also lost really some amazing people this year in our community that has touched, I know, everyone on staff and council in our community. We lost Clyde Marquardt, Harry Schriedman, and I just found out from Julie Kritzberger that Jackie Branch passed away on Saturday. And so, you know, just sad news all around. You know, when we get back to semi-normal through COVID, staff will work with the council on really just celebrating those that we've lost this year, because we've lost, you know, I named 3, but we've lost a lot more, and just to celebrate them appropriately, because what they mean to our town and all their volunteerism, I just can't say enough about it. And then lastly, you know, the fires are going on. I wanted to give a quick update. You know, we have our Central Marin Fire Authority have sent engine crews to 3 fires, Point Reyes, the Susanville fire, and the Lake fire in Los Angeles. And the latest update from Marin County Office of Emergency Services regarding the Point Reyes fire, it's currently 25% contained. There are 585 personnel fighting that fire, a total of 14 crews, 37 engines, 5 helicopters, 4 planes, and 5 bulldozers are fighting that fire. So that's the update right now. Say that again?
How many acres is that?
4,465 acres.
Man.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Okay, you said that was all?
That's all I have.
Great.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I wanted to, would you like me to read, if I can find it? I'll send it out to the council, and I'll also post it on the website. But there was a PG&E update regarding East Corte Madera. I did send that to Margaret. Steve Stein, thank you. He really took the lead for that neighborhood of really rallying PG&E and staff to communicate and figure out what the problem was. They did isolate it, and it had to do with a change in some of their equipment. Their fuses were being blown because they didn't have enough amps to work the overload from the fires and from the heat. You know, they didn't have enough amps running those certain circuits. So they think they fixed it. They gave an update to the community. I'll post that again with the help of Rebecca, but we think we've isolated the issue out there. So hopefully that doesn't happen again, and we're all monitoring it. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. We'll go to council member reports. Fred, do you have anything for us?
I have nothing to report.
Okay, Charles? Bob?
Just briefly, we've had multiple meetings of the Marin Wildfire JPA. They've all been closed session. We're trying to hire an executive director. We have nothing to report yet, but hopefully we'll soon. Thanks.
Great, thank you. David?
I attended the county's Bay Wave Executive Steering Committee having to do with sea level rise, and the main topic on the agenda actually was a presentation by our own RJ Suko about our climate adaptation plan for both hillsides and sea level rise. And I have to say that the compliments that came from Sausalito, from San Rafael, from Larkspur were really genuine and deep and out. And RJ did an outstanding job in that presentation. So take note, Todd, and pass that along. He really did a great job. It was an interesting, good discussion of the challenges that are in front of us.
Thank
Great.
you. I
Thank
will.
you, David.
Thank you.
Great, thank you guys. And I will just report really briefly, I attended the League of California Cities North Bay Division meeting last Friday. The discussion was about the coming election, how we can, sort of combat the administration's efforts to make it harder to vote, and also about how with the kind of shenanigans going on around the census, California is at risk of losing at least one seat in Congress, which would obviously affect Corte Madera's representation and funding. So that is an issue. I also wanted to mention that last Sunday, I believe, Age-Friendly Corte Madera, in lieu of their usual annual celebration at the community center for our residents who are 90 and over, went door to door to all of our residents age 90 and over and delivered them little gift baskets and certificates of honor. And I went with them along with some other volunteers, and it was just really nice to see how our visits really lit up some of these residents' faces. These are older folks who are living through probably among the craziest times in their lives and are isolated at home right now. Yeah, that's not a fun place to be when you may already feel isolated, due to age or mobility issues. So it was just really meaningful to see, the smile on these people's faces. And I'm sad to say that one of the people that we visited to honor was indeed Jackie Branch. So we're very sad that she's not with us anymore. I really appreciate Todd's idea to do something post-COVID to honor our residents who have left us during this time. And I think we're going to adjourn tonight's meeting when we do in Jackie's memory. And with that, there are no other council reports. Does anybody have any comments on the upcoming agenda, which is item 8A? If not, we are going to adjourn this council meeting in the honor of Jackie Branch.